there's kind of like two approaches to food that you kind of get depending on if you're eating with an Islander family or with like a Kiwi, like a white New Zealand family. And so kind of the white New Zealand type of food that you would get was a lot of roasted vegetables and roasted meats, everything covered in gravy. It was delicious. Lots of roast potatoes. They have a type of, it's kind of like a sweet potato that they call kumara. And they have different types of kumara. Some of it is like a purplish kind of color. Some of it is like the orange. But they like to eat a lot of like squash type vegetables, those types of things. It was very different when, compared to what we're used to eating over here in a lot of cases. But that was pretty typical that you'd get from the kind of white New Zealand families. But my favorites were with the Islanders. One, they fed you more food than you could possibly eat ever in one meal. And it was kind of weird because they wouldn't necessarily eat with you. They would provide the food for you, and they would sit you down at a table, and sometimes it was like a full dinner table, sometimes it was a coffee table, didn't really matter, but they would have just plates of food on there, and you'd look at it and be like, this is a lot of food. And it was all starches and protein, like for them. Most, like they didn't tend to give you, like, you didn't get a bowl of peas from them. You would get like this root vegetable called taro, which is like a potato kind of, but more dense and drier. A couple of missionaries put one of it through like a juicer, and there was no juice that came out of it. And so they typically will boil it or roast it in the oven and then serve it to you with coconut cream, and it's delicious. Takes a little while to get used to at first if you've never had it, but it's really good. And so they'll have like a plate of that, and then they'll have like a homemade mac and cheese or like something like that, and then they'll have usually like a fish or some other type of protein. And then sometimes they would have boiled green bananas. I'm trying to remember what they called it, but I can't remember what it's called right now. But they take these green bananas and they would boil them, and they come out starchy. Instead of like a fruit, they're more like a potato. And then they cover that in coconut cream. And that was not my favorite of all the things that we had. Some missionaries really liked it. And what would happen is you'd eat, you'd kind of get halfway through a plate of food, and you'd be like, all right, I'm doing well on the taro. And then they would take the plate away, refill it, and bring it back out and put it in front of you. And you would have no idea how you're going to eat as much food as they wanted you to eat. But for them, that was a big deal. Like the food culture for the Islanders, especially Samoans and Tongans, was you eat as much as you possibly can. And then I learned that if you make a couple of jokes with them about how if you eat any more, you'll explode in their kitchen or something like that, they would kind of laugh it off and let you off the hook. Otherwise, they might get offended. Because they really they idolize the missionaries. And that's one of their ways of serving the missionaries and helping them out. And so that was a really, really fun thing to have happen. But that was kind of your typical stuff. The other big thing was with the Maoris. They called it boil up. And they would take different types of, they call them either pork bones or bacon bones, which bacon bones were basically pork ribs. And the pork bones were kind of, I don't know exactly where, but it was a different type of like pork that it almost was more like the meat around the spine or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it came from, but they put it in a pot with just different types of greens and vegetables, and they just boil it for a long time, and then they put in almost like dumplings into it. I can't remember what they called it. And then they just take it out, serve it on a plate to you, and they would do that. Sometimes they would just have just the boil up, or sometimes they'd have, some of the families would have all this other stuff too. They'd have this big boil up, and then they'd have like roast chicken and other vegetables all on the side. And again, you just ate as much as you could. So it was a lot of fun. You gained weight in that mission for sure.